Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya, and this week we will discuss the new vistas in the defence production sector in India. India continues to be world's largest defence buyer, with 60 to 65% of its needs being met through imports. India's share in global arms imports from 2013 to 2017 is approximately 12%. In March this year, the Ministry of Defence released a draft of defence production policy with an ambitious vision of making India one of the top 5 producers of defence equipment in the world. The policy aims to achieve a turnover of 1,700 billion rupees in defence goods and services by 2025, with focus on becoming self-reliant in 13 areas, including fighter aircrafts, tanks and warships. This policy also envisages setting up of 2 defence production corridors. A few weeks after the release of this draft policy, more than 500 domestic companies and 163 global players of defence manufacturing industry participated in the 10th edition of Biennial Global Exhibition of Defence Equipment in Defence Expo 2018 held in Chennai. With its theme being India, the emerging defence hub, this event witnessed several memorandum of understandings and partnerships signed between foreign manufacturers and their Indian counterparts to produce defence products in India. So, what are the steps being taken to give necessary impetus to the defence manufacturing industry in India, and what is the road ahead for achieving the targets set in the draft defence production policy? For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests in the studio. Let me start by introducing them to you, beginning with the former Deputy Chief of the Indian Army, General Kadyan. I also have with me Captain Alok, Bansal, the Director of India Foundation, and we have with us Western Defence journalist Mr. Pravin, editor of Force magazine. Welcome all of you to the studios of Rajya Sabha Television. Let's begin with Pravin Sawhney, because Pravin, you're there in Defence Expo as well. And the reason why we are trying to understand the structure right now is because there was a lot of effort which was made during this 5-day event to project India as an emerging defence production hub, defence manufacturing hub. Given the figures which we have right now in terms of India's imports, exports, our capabilities to produce or manufacture rather defence products, and the target which we have set, how realistic do you believe the situation is right now?
So, you have basically asked 2 separate questions. One question is really on the draft defence production policy. Now, it's a draft, as the government itself says, which means the government has given about 2 weeks to the industry, to the other think tanks and independent people to put in their inputs into it. And then perhaps the government in its own wisdom will revise the whole thing and come out with what will be a defence production policy. Now, when I see the draft, there are a few things. It is an ambitious draft, absolutely, but I would say that there are a few things which are unrealistic. They are not real. For example, the target of this production policy is 7 years hence, which means 2025. There are certain things that we must achieve. Number one is we must become the leaders in artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence is something which is in an entirely new domain.
Okay.
It is perhaps what I call the second revolution of military affairs. It goes there. Now, what happens is China itself, just to give you a sense or to the viewers a sense, China has invested this year $9 billion in research in artificial intelligence. So, I think it is a bit unrealistic to have said artificial intelligence and autonomous weapon systems which are linked to the artificial intelligence.
Okay.
The second point, as you also pointed out, was about in 23 areas of ab initio or total designs that will be created, warships, submarines, we will become world leaders. We will become self-sufficient. Now, here the issue is really about technology. Now, technology, I must emphasize, no country will give you technology, the core technology. It never comes to you. You have to put in the research and put in the money, put in the effort, and this is a long drawn process. It does not happen over 1 year or 2 years. Now, we have to ask ourselves, you have the figures, everybody has the figures. Are we really investing in research? That is the point that we have to ask ourselves, whether it is DRDO, whether it is PSUs. So I think again that's a question mark there.
Okay.
Now, the third thing I must say, the good thing about the production policy and which I saw related to the ground also was about employment generation. Now, if we talk about employment generation, I could see things happening on the ground. For example, as you mentioned in the Defence Expo we recently concluded, three things came out very clearly. Number one, the government will put a lot of emphasis on what is being called the Make 2 projects. This is a very recent thing where basically they are encouraging the young people, the startups to really come and be part of the production of India. So Make 2 is a good idea. Then the Prime Minister himself announced at Def Expo something called the Innovation in Defence Excellence. Again, it is focused towards, it is targeted towards the startups.
Okay.
And then the third thing that we are talking about are these two corridors that you spoke about, one in Tamil Nadu and one in Uttar Pradesh.
Okay.
So I'll just finish by saying all these will help you, help the startups, it will help the small industry, the medium industry to really come up. But what we will eventually get is perhaps lot of employment because of low level technology. For middle and high level technology, which is where you gave the figures, they relate to import and export. I think that is still a grey area.
Okay, that's still a grey area. Let me bring in Captain Bansal here. And Captain Bansal, since we are talking about figures, and a lot of figures are making a lot of sense here to try and have the comparison. There is one more figure which I'll put through to you, and that is the export figures by 41 ordnance factories and 12 to 14 private sector companies in the defence manufacturing sector. For 2015-16, this was around 2,000 crore rupees. And for the first 9 months of 2016-17 financial year, this was around 1,105 crore rupees. From there to taking it to 350 billion, it's 7 years. And going by what points which have been raised by Mr. Pravin here, what are the hurdles here specifically?
See, as far as ordnance factories are concerned, they are the relics actually. Many of them are actually very using very primitive technologies. In fact, they are frozen in time. In fact, if you go and visit some of these ordnance factories, they are really the relics of the Raj. In fact, some of them are actually of the 50s, 60s vintage, and some of them are actually even pre-independence. And as a result, they were they belong to an era when it was licensed quota Raj. They were the sole producers. There was a sole buyer. There was no question of reducing price, quality control, nothing. So from that era to now, the current market-driven economy, they are actually finding themselves at loss.
Okay.
I really don't know many of these ordnance factories would be able to evolve as efficient units. Defense PSUs relatively, on the other hand, are relatively a newer issue, and we must take into account the big PSUs actually. You have shipyards, you have HAL, BEML. These are the ones which are doing a phenomenal job. In fact, they have come out with newer platforms, like HAL has come out with the Dhruv, now Tejas, and many other equipment that are coming up. Shipyards are building ships. And one of the advantages which I want to flag it here before I move further is that this year Def Expo was in Chennai, which is a coastal city. As a result, the Navy got a big chance to showcase its indigenization efforts. And of all the three services, Indian Navy has been far ahead of the two services as far as indigenization is concerned, for various reasons, because they have an in-house design bureau, they have an in-house R&D facility and things like that. As a result, 70% of the components of the ships that Navy is actually acquiring are being built in India. And not only are we building ships for us, if our shipyards become a little more efficient, we could start exporting, because labor still in India is far cheaper than many of the Western countries. And if we become a little more efficient, we'll gather those. The bigger problem in defense sector has been the red tape. In fact, this has been one of the biggest problems, and many of the brilliant initiatives of DRDO have actually got killed because of red tape in the ministry, as well as red tape within the uniformed headquarters.
Okay.
Because the three service headquarters are as much mired in red tape as the Ministry of Defence is. And many of the brilliant initiatives have actually not really succeeded. The QRs keep getting revised without allowing a newly developed technology to stabilize Now, if you keep changing the goalpost continuously, you can't achieve. Of course, DRDO has its own problems, the way they are looking after the people, the way they are looking after, there's a huge brain drain. They have not really come out with a policy by which you could retain people. And as he said, as far as artificial intelligence is concerned, China has really made significant strides.
Okay.
We are far behind, and I think we need to catch up. Of course, we have the brain power, we have the technical manpower. We have, in some ways, we are better off than China as far as the raw stock of manpower is concerned. But we have really not invested, we have not really given that direction which is required. Because if we actually succeed in this field, we could really take off. But I slightly disagree with Pravinji. One is that while nobody will be willing to give core technology, but Prime Minister Modi's Make in India actually gives them a huge incentive for foreign companies to come and invest.
Okay.
Even if a premier company comes with 100% FDI, it may not give the technology immediately, but it will establish downstream vendors who will actually supply. And in due course, technology always percolates. It may not happen immediately, but in due course, certain stages, it will percolate, and then that could be the basis for other Indian companies, because with the private sector having come in, you would see far more dynamism in this particular sector.
Okay, so the steps will be taken one by one, the results will be shown. Now that we have a bit of a clarity on what exactly the situation is and what are the hurdles, let's bring in somebody who belongs, or rather represents, the section who is to use all these equipments which are being either procured or manufactured. General Kadyan, from the armed forces perspective, there has been a lot of reservation about indigenous products, about the quality or about the time of delivery. And as Captain Bansal was pointing out, there's also reason is the red tapeism in both bureaucracy as well as military establishment. But moving beyond that, what exactly in the current scenario, what exactly are the armed forces looking at?
Absolutely, Vishal. Armed forces are part of India. It is in India's interest to have indigenization. And that is the Prime Minister's also his theme, it is his dream. The problem so far you mentioned has been that, take let's say Arjun tank. The production started in 1972, or the thought process started. The first one was delivered in 2003. More than 30 years later. What happens in the meantime? First, there is a huge cost overrun. Secondly, in the meantime, the world has moved ahead in technology. So, defensive forces are then compelled to revise their qualitative requirement. Then it's a vicious cycle. They blame the defense forces that we keep changing our mind. But there is no way out. Technology changes every 5-7 years. But all that can be overcome as far as the import of technology is concerned. We have the talent, there is no doubt about it. In fact, most of the Americans, high-end companies are headed by Indians. If we can reach Mars, the lowest cost in the world, I'm sure we can achieve this also. Today, if we are the largest importer, as you mentioned, and we are likely to remain around the top in the foreseeable future, we can make it a buyer's market. And technology transfer should be one of the preconditions. And I'm sure if they have to sell their military hardware, they will agree to it. It's a question of seeing eye to eye. There's a lot of competition. We have 5-6 major suppliers who can be competing with each other. And I'm sure ultimately they will agree. And it is a dream which we must make happen. Defense forces are part of it. They are into it. As long as they get the good quality and in time-bound manner, why shouldn't they welcome indigenous production?
Okay, so it has to be time-bound. Let me bring in Mr. Pravin here again. And Mr. Pravin, you painted a picture. You clarified as to how the situation is right now. But if you look at the hurdles which were pointed by Captain Bansal, and some more the kind of expectations which the armed forces has, how long you believe that it can be before we can meet indigenously the expectations of the armed forces, our own armed forces, so that we can cut down on the export content and we can then move on to the path of, import content, and we can move on to the part of exporting it?
So, you see, again, I come back to technology, because I'll tell you how I relate this to your question. Now, as far as Make in India is concerned, Make in India has to my mind, there are two serious issues involved here. Number one, is that the foreign OEM, the foreign company, he cannot be the major stakeholder. Now, if he is not the stakeholder, if he doesn't run the management, there is no way he'll bring the FDI in the country. You see, that's point number one. So, the money is not coming. You can see the record of the last 4 years. The second issue is on technology. Please see how much technology has come in the last 4 years. Again, the reason is very simple. As I say, there are now in technical terms, if I may say so, there are two types of technologies. One is called the source codes. Source code is the key thing that any nation will hold to itself, because, for example, when we say that this is a major power, so and so is a major power, what we are referring to is that it has the technology. That is the key thing. So, it will never give you the source code. Now, we are looking at the object code. Object code basically means that they will give you the know-how. No, sorry, the know-how. I mean, how you can use their basic thing to further make the things. Precisely this thing happened with China. But what the Chinese did was, more than reverse engineering a system, what they did was they invested their mind, time, money into it. And they could come out with new ideas and solutions.
Okay.
Which means that despite not having a very good basic research, basic sciences, applied sciences, they could still come out with new products. So, what I am trying to say is, India is not even known to do the reverse engineering. So, what I am saying is that all these targets that we talk about, that when we can become self-sufficient, well, yes, we will generate the employment. That is perhaps the Prime Minister's key motive. But as far as becoming self-sufficient is concerned, we have to first get our policies correct. We have to understand technology. Money has to be put in research.
Okay, so the transfer of technology remains a thorny issue. Let me bring in Captain Bansal on this. Captain Bansal, how do we tackle this? We can talk about ordnance factories being revamped or the red tapeism being cut down, but the TOT, the transfer of technology, how do we tackle this aspect?
I think we have to invest as far as our primary educational institutions are concerned. Visit to US or even China would show you that their educational institutions and the infrastructure that they have available to them is far ahead of us. I think we need to invest far more in that. I think that environment that we have to create where primary research can be undertaken is to some extent missing in India. We have to create that ecosystem for primary research. But please remember, China also allowed others to invest and build up on that. So, I think as a first step, Make in India makes perfect sense. And what Prime Minister has said very categorically is that on case-to-case basis, even 100% FDI is permitted. So, this assessment that the OEM will not have the controlling stake to some extent is flawed. In major issues where major technologies are involved, they will have the controlling stake. They can have even 100% stake. So, that is not an issue. The point is that India's large order book can be used as a leverage to get these companies to come and invest. And once they start investing and the economies of scale work out, then this could be made into an export hub for exporting it to third countries. Once you attain that level of expertise, then of course creating that ecosystem for primary research, then you can probably carry out parallel processes and probably integrate with the object code at some stage and then come out with newer technologies, newer products, newer innovations. But you have to create that environment, and that environment can be created by foreign direct investment. I don't believe that we have to wait till primary research picks up. For the first, at the initial stages, we must encourage FDI. FDI should come and invest. But as I said, bureaucratic red tape is a big impediment. Many good policies of the government have actually crashed when they have been faced with the bureaucratic red tape of India, which is actually phenomenal. In fact, the bureaucrats know only their own good. They really have stymied many well-meaning projects of the government.
Okay, so these are two aspects. Let me bring in again, General Kadyan. But when it comes to armed forces and their requirements, which are increasing leaps and bounds with each passing day due to backlogs which have not been cleared so far, there are options available, the indigenous options. And then there is an option that you acquire it from outside. So where would the armed forces be able to strike balance here? They need to augment their operational capabilities as well, but they also need to give an upliftment to the indigenous systems.
Yeah. Vishal, ever since this policy was announced in 2014, we've been saying that this cannot be done overnight. It's a very slow process. minimum 15 to 20 years it will take. So initially the indigenization element can be increased and gradually we can become self-reliant totally, which may be a long-term aim. As far as the FDI is concerned, I think if one goes by the figures, the last 3 years, 14 to 17, 160 billion came as FDI, may not be only on defense but all sectors, which was nearly 1/3 of the previous 14 years. So there is the influx of FDI. And as Bansal very rightly brought out, that government to government, if the government approved, then 100% FDI in the defense is permitted. The second is that I think there is a pitfall when we compare ourselves to China. The comparison cannot be just in the production side. We have to compare the overall political system. China is not a democracy. Our industries have to have a welfare element built into it. China is not bound by any such compulsion. They can have long working hours, they can have low wages, whatever profits they make, they don't have to invest into the welfare of the people. So I don't think that comparison, it will only discourage us in the years to come. The kind of money because of cheap labor, they are capturing the world market. So we should look at ourselves. Technology, they will be reluctant, surely. But if you give them interest inside Indian production, I'm sure they will come. And since there is a competition, as I said, we can make it a buyer's market. India will continue to remain a very, very big importer of or big requirement of defense equipment. That can be exploited.
Okay, to wrap up the discussion and to sum this up, let me go back to Pravin here. Pravin ji, if you look at the kind of participation which was there in Defence Expo, there were almost more than 150 global players. There were around 40 foreign delegations as well. And India made sure that its defence attaches, wherever they are posted, they should be also here to try and interact. So quite a lot of push. In terms of defence production corridors as well, 2 of them have been envisaged. So is this amalgamation of both sides of the strategy done well right now, and how can this proceed further?
I dare say what you've said is partially correct. Let me give the incorrect part first. The incorrect part is that the participation from the foreign OEMs was very, very less.
Compared to the previous one.
And the reason is very simple. Just listen me out. The reason is, what is the Def Expo about at the end of the day? Defence Expo basically is about showcasing of technology. In Defence Expo, 2 things happen. One is the contracts are signed. In our case, it does not happen. But certainly in Def Expo, the requirement is showcasing of technology so that people, the professionals can come and see the technology at one place. Now, the point is that if you will not fix the place and the date, because for these foreign OEMs, they have to go to so many shows in a year. When I go to Farnborough, now I'll be going to Farnborough in about 2 months' time. The moment I'm there, I get to know the date 2 years hence when it will be held.
So the procedural delay is your point?
No, so the point is the participation was minimal. Now, as far as Make in India is concerned, let's be very real. Make in India has been going on in India well before the government came. Make in India is nothing great. It is basically about transferring the know-how. The Soviets have been giving us, then the Russians have given us. All this is Make in India, submarines, what is happening is all Make in India. You see, so in terms of employment, yes, this government is giving a push. There is no doubt about it. Now coming to the other part, unless you see our defense procurement policy, it emanates from the defense production policy. If we do not get, right now it's the draft. If we do not get real on our defense production policy, our procurement policy, where the biggest snag today is the strategic partnership, which was announced by the government, it has still not been resolved. And I remember this question came up when the defense minister was there at Def Expo, and the reply of the Secretary of Defense Production was that this is something, we are trying to sort out, but this will take time. So here is the bottom line. The bottom line is, Make in India is doing pretty well in this country. There is no problem at all. But I think we have to get a little real about our defense expositions, their role in it, because they play a very important role. And at the same time, we have to perhaps really review the entire draft production policy.
Captain Bansal, your concluding comments?
Just one clarification. When Pravin says that yes, Make in India has been going on for decades, I agree. Yes, we were getting technology from Russians, we were building it here. But the way it was being built here, Firstly, it was public sector, government to government. The way it was being built, it was only to meet Indian requirement. It could have never been in a position to export because one engine was being manufactured in Sunabela, the airframe was being manufactured in Bangalore, something was being manufactured in Nasik. That way, you cannot make a production coherent unit. Now, what is important is that now it is the private sector. Please understand, when Rafale 126 order was given, the government insisted that you have to collaborate with HAL. That actually led to the stage where we have come. Rafale was willing to partner with the private sector because they know how bureaucratic red tape can stymie the public sector. So now the focus is on private sector. Now this private sector, the private sector coming in will actually give it the requisite fillip, and I hope this Make in India of the current government will be different from what it was in the previous regimes.
Okay, General Kadyan, we're running short of time, but if you could sum it up in 30 seconds, what's the road ahead?
I think Make in India is a very good concept. Defence forces will be assured the supply will be guaranteed in time of certain lead, which you cannot rely if it is a import. And the quality we can control. We have the talent, it's only the procedures that need to be streamlined. We have to, of course, match it with our democratic compulsions, which will always be there. But it's a very good idea as far as the defence forces are concerned. They will welcome it. It will take 15-20 years, but it's a good start that government has given a push to.
Okay, so clearly it looks like that as far as defence procurement and defence production policies are concerned, they will have to be in tandem with each other. But as our panelists are pointing out, Make in India seems to be a good initiative. It might take some time as well for all these efforts to bore out results, but then we will have to focus on our research and development facilities to ensure that we have the technology to develop them into final products. We'll come back again next week with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.